The flak burst tears through the B-17 at 20,000 feet. Staff Sergeant Alan Maggie is trapped in the ball turret when the second explosion hits. He climbs into the fuselage to grab his parachute, but it has been shredded by shrapnel. Before he can think of another plan, a German fighter rakes the aircraft with machine gun fire. The impact knocks him unconscious and throws him out of the bomber. He falls 4 miles through frozen air, crashes through the glass roof of the St. Nazaire train station, and lands on steel girders. When German soldiers arrive to collect his body, they discover he is still breathing. It is January 3rd, 1943, and the United States Army Air Forces are flying another daylight bombing raid over occupied France. The target is the submarine pens at St. Nazaire, one of the most heavily defended sites in Nazi-controlled territory. The Germans know the Americans are coming. They have radar fighter aircraft on standby and hundreds of anti-aircraft guns positioned around the port. For the crews of the B-17 flying fortresses heading toward the target, this is not a question of whether they will face resistance. It is a question of how many of them will make it back. Staff Sergeant Alan Eugene Maggie is 24 years old. He is from Plainfield, New Jersey. He joined the Army Air Forces and trained as a ball turret gunner, one of the most dangerous positions on a bomber. The ball turret is a spherical compartment that hangs beneath the fuselage of the B-17. It is made of plexiglass and metal, just wide enough for one man and two .50 caliber machine guns. The gunner sits in a fetal position with his knees pulled up to his chest, feet in stirrups, hands on the gun controls. There is no room to wear a parachute inside the turret. If something goes wrong, the gunner has to climb out, retrieve his parachute from inside the fuselage, clip it on, and then bail out. That process takes time, and in combat, time is the one thing you do not have. Maggie's aircraft is a B-17F Flying Fortress nicknamed Snap, Crackle, Pop. It is part of the 360th Bomb Squadron, 303rd Bomb Group. The crew has flown together before. They know the drill. They know the risks. But on this mission, over one of the most dangerous targets in Europe, everything that can go wrong will go wrong. And Maggie will face a choice that no training manual ever prepared him for. The formation approaches St. Nazaire. Below them, the city is a maze of docks, warehouses, and reinforced concrete bunkers that house German submarines. The anti-aircraft guns open up. Flak fills the sky, black bursts of shrapnel and smoke that spread across the bomber stream like a disease. The B-17s fly through it because there is no way around it. Pilots hold their course, bombardiers line up their targets, and gunners scan the sky for enemy fighters. Then the first shell hits snap, crackle, pop. The explosion tears through the fuselage, shredding metal and wiring. Maggie is in the ball turret when the blast disables the turret's hydraulic system. He cannot move the guns. He cannot rotate the turret. He is stuck in a metal sphere beneath a crippled aircraft that is under continuous fire. He uses the manual crank to rotate the turret back into position so he can climb out. It takes several minutes of cranking in the cramped space before the hatch aligns with the fuselage opening. He pulls himself up into the aircraft, bleeding from shrapnel wounds. Inside the fuselage, the situation is chaos. Smoke fills the compartment. Wires hang loose from the ceiling. The aircraft is shaking from damage and from the ongoing flak barrage. Maggie looks for his parachute. It is stored in a compartment near the turret, exactly where it is supposed to be. But when he grabs it, he sees that it has been destroyed. The flak that disabled his turret also shredded the parachute. The fabric is torn. The lines are cut. It is completely useless. Maggie stares at the ruined parachute. He is trying to think of another option, trying to figure out what to do next, when the second flak burst hits. This one is closer, and the explosion rips through the fuselage near where he is standing. A German fighter follows up with machine gun fire, stitching a line of rounds through the already damaged aircraft. One of those rounds, or the force of the explosion, or the combination of both, knocks Maggie unconscious and throws him out of the B-17. He does not jump. He does not choose to leave the aircraft. He is simply gone. When Maggie regains consciousness, he is falling through the air. The cold wind is blowing against his face. He is 4 miles above the ground. He has no parachute. He is traveling at terminal velocity, approximately 120 miles per hour. And there is absolutely nothing he can do to stop what is about to happen. We do not know what goes through a person's mind in that situation. Maggie never spoke in detail about those moments. He said later that he remembered the sensation of falling and the realization that he was going to die. But he did not describe panic or terror. He described a strange sense of clarity, a kind of acceptance. He was falling. There was no way to survive, so he fell. The ground rushes up toward him. Below, the city of Saint Nazaire is visible through the smoke and haze. The train station sits near the center of the city, a large structure with a glass and steel roof. Maggie does not aim for it. He does not have any control over where he is going, but that is where he falls. At approximately 120 miles per hour, he crashes through the glass roof of the Saint Nazaire train station and lands on the steel girders that support the ceiling. Let us know in the comments where you are watching this from. Are you in the United States, Germany, the United Kingdom, or somewhere else? We would love to know who is keeping these stories alive. Back on the ground, German soldiers are responding to the sound of breaking glass and the impact. German soldiers rush to the train station. They expect to find a body. What they find instead is Alan Maggie, unconscious, bleeding, broken, but alive. He is dangling from one of the steel girders, surrounded by shattered glass. The soldiers cannot believe what they are seeing. They saw the B-17 explode. They saw objects falling from the sky. No one survives a fall from 4 miles up, but Maggie is breathing. They carefully extract him from the wreckage and transport him to a German military hospital. The doctors begin assessing his injuries, and the list is almost incomprehensible. He has 28 shrapnel wounds from the flak and machine gun fire that hit his aircraft. His right leg is broken. His right ankle is broken. He has severe damage to his nose and one eye. His lungs and kidneys are damaged from the impact. His right arm is nearly severed and hanging by tendons and a small amount of skin. By all logic, by every principle of physics and human biology, he should be dead. But the doctors stabilize him. They work to save his arm. They treat his internal injuries. And slowly, over days and then weeks, Maggie begins to recover. He will later say that he owes his life to the German military doctor who treated him. The care he received was professional, thorough, and likely the reason his arm was not amputated. War creates strange moral situations. The same nation that shot him out of the sky also saved his life. If you are enjoying this story and want more untold accounts from World War II, make sure to subscribe to the channel. We are bringing you stories that most history books never covered. Maggie's survival becomes something of a sensation among the German soldiers and medical staff. So how did Alan Maggie survive a fall from 20,000 feet without a parachute? There have been several theories over the years, and the truth is probably a combination of factors. The first theory is that the glass roof of the train station broke his fall. When Maggie hit the glass, it shattered in stages, absorbing some of his kinetic energy before he reached the steel girders. Instead of hitting solid ground at 120 miles per hour, he experienced a series of smaller impacts that gradually slowed him down. The second theory involves the structure of the roof itself. The glass was mounted on a sloped frame. Some accounts suggest that Maggie slid along part of the roof before breaking through, which would have reduced his speed further. The combination of the glass breaking in stages and the potential slide along the slope may have reduced his impact velocity enough that survival became possible, if not probable. The third theory is the most controversial and the least supported by evidence. Some accounts claim that a bomb from one of the other B-17s hit the train station at the exact moment Maggie was falling through it, and the shockwave from the explosion broke his fall. This theory was even tested by the television show Mythbusters in their fourth season. They concluded it was not plausible. The timing would have to be perfect down to a fraction of a second, and there is no reliable evidence that a bomb actually hit the station at that time. The most likely explanation is the simplest one. Maggie fell through a glass roof that broke in stages, slowing his descent enough that he hit the steel girders at a reduced speed. He still suffered catastrophic injuries, but the deceleration was gradual enough that his body did not experience the instant stop that typically kills people in falls from great heights. It was not a miracle in the supernatural sense. It was physics, probability, and an almost unimaginable amount of luck. Alan Maggie is not the only World War II airman to survive a fall from extreme altitude without a parachute. There are at least 2 other documented cases, and the similarities between them are striking. All 3 men fell from aircraft that had been shot down or severely damaged. All 3 fell into environments that absorbed some of the impact energy, and all 3 survived injuries that should have killed them. Nicholas Alcemade was a 21-year-old tail gunner in the Royal Air Force. On the night of March 24, 1944, his Lancaster bomber was hit by German anti-aircraft fire over Germany. A fire broke out in the tail section where Alcemade was positioned. He reached for his parachute and discovered it had been destroyed by the flames. He was trapped in a burning aircraft at 18,000 feet with no way out except to jump. Alcemade made the same choice Maggie made, though his was deliberate. He stepped out of the tail section and fell. He expected to die within seconds. Instead, he fell through the branches of fir trees in a forest below, which slowed his descent. He landed in deep snow that cushioned the final impact. When he woke up 3 hours later, he had a sprained knee, some burns from the fire, and pieces of plexiglass embedded in his skin. He had fallen 18,000 feet and walked away with injuries most people get from a bad ski accident. Ivan Mikhailovich Chisov was a Soviet Air Force lieutenant and navigator on an Ilyushin Il-4 bomber. On January 21, 1942, his aircraft was attacked by German fighters over the Eastern Front. Chisov bilayed out at approximately 23,000 feet. He intended to delay opening his parachute to avoid being targeted by German fighters during his descent. But the thin air at that altitude caused him to lose consciousness, and he never pulled the ripcord. Chisov fell more than 20,000 feet and hit the edge of a snow-filled ravine at an estimated speed between 120 and 150 miles per hour. The slope of the ravine allowed him to slide, bleeding off speed rather than stopping instantly. Soviet cavalrymen who had been watching the air battle saw him fall and rushed to the impact site. They found him alive, still wearing his unopened parachute. He regained consciousness shortly afterward. Like Maggie and Alcemade, he survived because the environment broke his fall in stages rather than all at once. Let us talk about what actually happens when a human body falls from extreme altitude, because the numbers help us understand why these survivals are so extraordinary. When Alan Maggie was thrown from his B-17, the aircraft was flying at approximately 20,000 feet. That is 96 meters, or 3.79 miles. At that altitude, the air is thin and cold, with temperatures well below freezing. A human body falling through the air reaches terminal velocity at approximately 120 miles per hour, or 193 kilometers per hour. Terminal velocity is the maximum speed a falling object reaches when the force of air resistance equals the force of gravity. After reaching terminal velocity, the body does not accelerate further. It continues falling at that constant speed until it hits something. When a human body traveling at 120 miles per hour hits solid ground, the deceleration is nearly instantaneous. The human body is not designed to withstand that kind of force. Internal organs continue moving forward even after the body has stopped, causing massive internal injuries. Bones shatter. Blood vessels rupture. The brain impacts the inside of the skull. Death is usually instant or occurs within minutes from catastrophic internal trauma. But if something breaks the fall in stages, survival becomes possible. In Maggie's case, the glass roof shattered in layers, each layer absorbing some kinetic energy. In Alchemade's case, the fir tree branches bent and broke, each one slowing his descent slightly. In Chisov's case, the slope of the ravine converted some of his downward momentum into horizontal momentum, and the deep snow absorbed the rest. The key in all three cases is that the deceleration was gradual rather than instant. Maggie fell from 20,000 feet and survived with 28 shrapnel wounds, multiple broken bones, severe organ damage, and a nearly severed arm. Alchemade fell from 18,000 feet and survived with a sprained knee and minor burns. Chisov fell from 23,000 feet and survived with critical injuries that kept him hospitalized for months. All three should have died. All three lived. And all three became examples of the absolute outer edge of human survivability. Alan Maggi does not walk out of the German hospital. He spends weeks recovering from his injuries. His broken bones begin to heal. His internal organs stabilize. His arm, which the doctors managed to save, regains some function, though it will never be the same. When he is strong enough to be moved, he is transferred to Stalag 17 billion, a prisoner of war camp in Krems, Austria. Life in a prisoner of war camp is a different kind of survival. There is no more falling, no more flak, no more missions. But there is hunger, cold, boredom, and the constant uncertainty of whether you will live to see liberation. Maggi is one of thousands of Allied airmen held in German camps. He receives basic medical care for his ongoing injuries. He follows the camp routines. And he waits. The war continues without him. More bombing raids over Germany and occupied Europe. More aircraft shot down. More crews killed or captured. The Allies are winning but slowly, and the price in lives is staggering. Inside the camp, news filters in through Red Cross packages, rumors, and occasional updates from new prisoners. Maggi hears about the invasion of Normandy, the liberation of Paris, the push into Germany itself. He knows the end is coming. He just does not know when. In May 1945, the camp is liberated by Allied forces. Maggi is free. He returns to the United States. He receives the Air Medal for meritorious conduct and the Purple Heart for his injuries. But the real recognition, the thing that matters most to him, is simply being alive. He survived a fall that should have killed him instantly. He survived his injuries. He survived the war. Alan Maggi was not the only man on snap, crackle, pop that day. The B-17 carried a crew of 10. When the aircraft was hit by flak and fighters over St. Nazaire, the pilot gave the order to bail out. 2 crew members managed to parachute to safety. One of them was Lieutenant Glenn Wintersetter. The other was Technical Sergeant Dennis Hart. Both were captured and became prisoners of war. 7 crew members did not make it out. They died when the aircraft went down. Their names are recorded in the official casualty reports and on the graves at the American Military Cemetery in Normandy. Lieutenant Wintersetter, Technical Sergeant Hart, and 5 others whose families received telegrams informing them that their sons, husbands, and brothers were missing in action. Maggi carried the memory of those men for the rest of his life. In 1989, he returned to France with his wife. They visited the American Military Cemetery at St. James in Normandy, where many of his crewmates are buried. Maggi paid his respects at their graves. He stood there, decades after the war, thinking about the men who did not survive the mission that should have killed him too. There is no simple way to process survivors' guilt. No easy answer to the question of why one person lives and another dies when the circumstances seem random. Maggi survived because he was thrown from the aircraft at exactly the right moment, at exactly the right trajectory, to fall through the glass roof of the train station. A few seconds earlier or later, a slightly different angle, and he would have hit solid ground like the 7 crew members who died in the crash. It was not heroism. It was not skill. It was chance. Alan Eugene Maggi lived until December 20th, 2003. He was 84 years old. He had lived for 60 years after the fall that should have ended his life at 24. He married, raised a family, worked, and told his story to anyone who asked. He became known as the man who fell from the sky without a parachute and survived. But to himself, he was always just a gunner who got lucky. His story is extraordinary, but it is also a reminder of how many similar stories were never recorded. How many airmen fell from damaged aircraft and did not land in snowbanks or glass roofs or tree branches? How many hit solid ground at terminal velocity and died instantly, with no one to document the last moments of their lives? The official records list them as killed in action, aircraft lost, crew presumed dead. Their falls are unmarked, their final seconds unknown. Maggi's survival gives us a window into what should be impossible. It shows us the absolute edge of human endurance and the role of chance in survival. It also shows us something else, that even in the most hopeless situations, even when falling 4 miles through frozen air with no parachute, the outcome is not certain until it happens. Maggi did not know he would survive. He expected to die, but he lived anyway. That is the lesson, if there is one. Not that survival is likely when it seems impossible, but that it is not impossible until it is over. Maggi fell. He crashed through glass and steel. He woke up broken but alive, and he spent the next 60 years living a life he never expected to have. Every day after January 3, 1943, was borrowed time, and he used it well.